Tattoo artists of Reddit. What is the saddest, most emotional thing you have ever had to tattoo for somebody? I tattooed a half sleeve on a man in his late 40s. It was his first tattoo. His daughter, his only child, had died 6 months earlier in a single car accident on the interstate. She was 17. He got a Japanese koi turning into a dragon because she had been really into Japanese stuff, anime, martial arts, etc. I met his wife and friends and his daughter's boyfriend, who I also ended up tattooing. The tattoo took multiple sessions, so we talked a lot. It was heartbreaking seeing the grief that affected him, but also everyone connected to him and his family. His wife was pretty glass-eyed and vacant while he was more open with his grief. We both teared up a few times throughout that tattoo. Julie died way too young. You do great work. Helping people heal and loving them is a special gift. One of our family's friend just got a tattoo, which when she got it done made the artist doing it cry. She's very young, barely 21, but she was married and had a 2-year-old son. This past year they were on their way to her mother's house for dinner when a girl going too fast around a corner hit their car. The baby died instantly and her husband died 8 hours later in the hospital. They had to keep her on heavy medication and on suicide watch for the next week. Both her and the artist were in tears by the end. This is so incredibly sad. Honestly, one of my biggest fears. Tattoo artist here. It's never easy to do a memorial tattoo. My most recent heartbreaker was Valentine's Day. She was a first-time client who wanted some lettering with watercolor splashes behind it on her ribs. She didn't say why, and I didn't think much of it until she started talking about the why when we were halfway through. Apparently she is a single mom who had lost her only child, a teenage son, last year after an extended fight with cancer. She didn't date while her son was sick because she knew the odds weren't good for her kid, and she wanted to spend all the time she could and concentrate on him. And every year, on Valentine's Day, whether he was in the hospital or home, they would have a date and celebrate together. This was her first Valentine's without a date, and the lettering was what he used to say to her when she would get overwhelmed. I had to go cry in the bathroom for a little bit. I have a kid and I freaking hate doing memorial tattoos for children because I'm marking people with my worst nightmare. I know it helps them, but it is a heavy weight. I carry the memorials with me for a while, and some of them never go away. The one that haunts me was a dad who was really straight-laced, works in a very professional field, getting his first tattoo in honor of his son that had passed. I had heard about the death on the news, as the kid had died in combat in Afghanistan just a few days prior. His wife was there, and they told me so much about their son I felt like I went to high school with him. His favorite food was apples. His favorite color was green. His first love was named Julie, and the breakup was why he joined the army instead of staying in town and going to college. He was a wicked left-handed pitcher and knew all the words to every Beatles song ever written, and his parents were utterly devastated that he was gone. His mother flat out told me the only reason she was bothering to stay alive was her other adult children. They both cried through the whole thing. I've got nothing except a little bundle of needles and some ink to help these poor, heartbroken people with. I do my best with their tattoos and I hug them tight when they go. Not an artist, but brother is one. Guy who lost both of his daughters came in and wanted a tattoo of them when they were little on his bicep with the words "never forget." Both of them apparently went down to Mexico by themselves one summer for vacation and were pulled over by some guy claiming to be an undercover police officer and just vanished after that. Car and everything went missing. Guy got limited support from FBI and basically got told at best his daughters were both dead. Brother did the tattoo for free after hearing the story, but the guy killed himself a couple of weeks later. Oh my god. That's absolutely horrible. I feel so sorry for the man. Dead baby children memorials. Names. Little angel wings. Birth and death dates that are only a few days, weeks, months apart. I love you mummy in a 5-year-old's goofy writing. Tiny footprint much smaller than a normal newborn's footprint. Did a bloody sad one a few weeks ago. Some handwriting in a music tattoo design. It was a short message of love from older brother to his little sister, with the nickname he called her from a birthday card he had written her. He died unexpectedly last year of an undiagnosed medical condition in his early 20s. His mum and sister both got tattoos on his birthday at the shop where he got his tattoos done. They were keeping their chins up, but I think everyone in the room shed tears at some point. I should quit throwing away cards. Not a tattoo artist, but I regularly help out at a shop. There was this girl who walked in one day, a frail, thin girl with wispy hair and slouched down shoulders who had lots of questions about if you could get a photograph as a tattoo. The next day, she walked back in, holding a small picture of her as a little girl and her mother, holding hands and an ice cream in the other, and wanted it done on her upper back. She was very quiet and paid full price for it before, which was out of place. When it was being done, she finally started talking about it. The picture was her last happy memory she had from her childhood. The day the picture was taken, the day they'd gone to a carnival and on the way home stopped for ice creams, where they took the picture. The next morning, the mum didn't wake up. Brain aneurysm in the night. The father couldn't believe that their perfect happy life flipped over in a few hours, and took to drinking. A few months later, he told the girl he was sorry for putting her through what he was, and then drove off a bridge. The girl came from a large family, and was bounced around from one to another as nobody wanted her quiet, silent self. They all kept wanting the happier version she used to be, but she couldn't. Eventually, at 18 she moved to an out-of-state college, which is why she was in the city, and was living alone. She didn't really make new friends in college, and all she thought about was, what next? She still was living with the idea that one day everything might be magically fixed. The tattoo artist actually had to get up and take 5 minutes off because he was too scared of his hand quivering. Also, that day really put my life in perspective. You think you have it all, and then one tiny blip turns your whole life around? How do you fix yourself? My mother also died of an aneurysm. Same thing, just didn't wake up. Not a bad way to go, if you had to choose. But that being said, it can happen to anyone, at any time. Zero warning. Young or old, everyone should be reminded of this from time to time. Professional artist 10 years EXP here. I don't want to go into too much detail because thinking about that week was hard, but a very close friend of mine passed away and was cremated, and her sister had some of her ash mixed into the ink for a memorial tattoo. It's an incredibly small amount, entirely safe and will not affect the healing process. I can't really tell you the feeling of handling that task or the ashes themselves, knowing they were a part of someone who I could physically hug just a few days before. It wasn't an easy process. I've been a tattoo artist for 4 or 5 years now in a small, well-known shop with a great reputation. I'm new and don't have a huge client base built up yet, so, in between appointments I get to talk to the walk-ins and try to pick up some new customers. This girl comes in one afternoon. She's young, beautiful, and really shy. She comes to the counter and asks about getting her first tattoo. A flock of silhouetted birds flying up her back and fading away into nothingness. I check her ID and see that she's just 3 days past turning 18 and tell her sure. I get the drawing whipped up and she approves. We head back to my room to get started on the tattoo. She's one of those clients who never says much of anything, so I oblige her with not chattering constantly like I usually do and just listen music while I work. We're 3 hours into this back piece and she has said maybe 6 words the entire time. When I take a little break to stretch, ask her why she chose this for her first tattoo. It's for my daughter, she says, and gives me the silent treatment again. No biggie. If she wants to be quiet then I'll let her. 20 minutes later she starts to say something that I don't quite hear. I was just finishing up the last of the tattoo, and when I set my machine down I asked her what she had started to say. She gets up to look, and really quietly is she checking out her tattoo in the reflection of the mirror. She says, "I lost my daughter 3 months ago." She goes on to say that her daughter's father shook her baby trying to get her to stop crying and killed her, and that this tattoo, with birds flying up her back and fading away, was because all she wanted to do was fade away into nothing to be with her daughter. I am a grown butt man, and seeing this fresh out of school, really beautiful girl, with all this life ahead of her, torn down into someone who just doesn't want to live anymore, I lost it and started crying. That was it. I guess I needed a cry today. Thank you for helping these people heal. Being tattooed. Not the tattoo artist. I have Larrikin tattooed down my leg. The artist thought it was a joke. I told him that my birthday is April Fool's Day. A friend of mine at school who was confined to a wheelchair found this out and decided he'd start calling me Larrikin. It never really caught on, but every time he saw me he'd yell Larrikin at the top of his lungs. He died when we were in year 9. I've called myself Lyric in online since. It took 7 years to get the tattoo done in memory of him. Forgot to add, the misspelling is intentional. He never was very good at English. I worked with a woman who let her 14-year-old son get a huge frick cancer tattooed across his chest, Tupac Cubs style. I lost it when it dawned on me that only a mom who knew her son wasn't going make it would pay for a frick cancer tattoo for a 14-year-old. That's amazing. It's so simple, but it probably had a huge impact on that kid. A final way to feel someone empowered. I would love to know his reaction and I guess just the whole story of the tattoo. How it took it and such. OBV, the pain of a tattoo would be nothing to what he's been through. One of my father's employees recently had her mother's last phone message converted into sound waves and then got a tattoo of the sound waves. Most people would see that and think it's a stupid tattoo, but to those who know the meaning, it's touching. Had a friend who did this. I love you sound waves in white on his wrist. Just looks like a little scar, and that's exactly what it is. A lot of people thought it was stupid and were kinda dickish about it. Obligatory, not an artist, yet haven't ruled it out. In high school I had this friend whose mom fell ill and was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer and given months to live. It was an inoperable glioblastoma. His anxiety, pain, sadness, and suffering over losing his mom at such a young age was heartbreaking to watch as it was. This guy loved Star Wars more than anything. It was his true love, honestly. Upon receiving her diagnosis, his mom got "I love you, son" tattooed on her arm along with a gigantic R2D2. She said her body was going, and she wanted to keep her one true love with it. She eventually passed barely 2 months later, but I found that an extremely touching tribute. It's something that could be so silly, but to me it was profound. He should get one in response saying, "I know." I had a pretty young guy come to me for a heart and roses. As we sat down to work, I asked him if he was getting them for his wife. He told me that him and his 11 son had been planning a camping trip, and a few hours before they were due to leave, his son shot himself with dad's gun in his study. At first, I thought he was making a cruel joke. The suffering in his eyes was immeasurable. I almost burst into tears right there. Covering up abusive exes' names, dead relative pet memorials, etc. The latest emotional tattoo was actually a dead pet memorial. They had a sphinx that just died and they saw I posted a picture of mine on our shop FB page. They decided to come see me. Now, my cat is my child. She is the most loving creature on the planet. I love her more than anything and we have had a few seizure scares lately. I had to fight back tears as they talked about losing their cat and how much they missed him. It broke my heart and even makes me tear up a little writing this now, reliving the experience. IDK what it is, but I know so many tattoo artists that have those cats, which are not terribly common, lol. My tattoo artist told me about his most intense experience. Him and his best friend, like since they were toddlers, had been planning this crazy chest piece that he was super excited about. The best friend went to play a show and got hit by a drunk driver on the way there. He died and left behind his mourning wife. Evidently this chest piece was all he had been talking about recently and he was over the moon that it was ready to get inked on him. So, after the mortician cleaned him up, he went to the funeral home and tattooed the chest piece on his dead best friend privately with his wife before the service started. I break down at funerals for people who I'm not even strongly attached to. I can't even imagine having to do this to my best friend. But in his eyes he was getting to share this last thing with his best friend. If I recall, the whole left wall of his shop was a memorial to said best friend. Most recently my friend tattooed my Siamese cat, Chips, to my arm about an hour after I found out he'd been hit by a car. He let me cry the whole time. I couldn't even feel the tattoo. The one that got to my usual artist was 7 years ago. I was 19 and my boyfriend shot himself. I got my thigh tattooed and my artist and I spent most of the time in total silence. He didn't know the situation until I got the shop and he was so understanding. He wouldn't charge me. I forced him to take a big tip for his time. He's been my artist ever since, and 90% of my tattoos are memorials. When it rains, it pours. My heart goes out to all the stories in here. Wishing all of you peace. A lot of the time you will see your next customer waiting and just think, ugh, why all the weirdos. So many widows. This guy had black stumps for teeth and was dressed all in black leather, covered in terrible tattoos. I know that's very judgmental, but really we do meet some very interesting humans and they are often not too nice. Anyway, I started talking to him about what he was after, and he wanted frick cancer written across his wrist, with an anarchy symbol for the ear. He had a weird slurring voice. I got talking to him when we started and it turned out he was in the final stages of throat cancer that had destroyed his throat to the point that they had to remove his tongue and build a new one out of his thigh. He showed me the chunk missing from his leg. The cancer drugs had rotted his teeth away. He had no idea how long he had left and didn't care either way at that point. Only a couple years before he had lost his sister to cancer and had no remaining family. He lived in housing association housing, had a history of drug abuse, and had been battling cancer for years. He was one of the most cheerful, positive people I had ever met, even in the face of this horrifying disease that had taken everything from him. I feel lucky I got to meet him. I have no idea where he is now, but I hope he's doing okay. TLDR. This amazing dude had terminal cancer and was getting a tattoo as a final frick you to his disease. One of my twins passed away before they were born. The staff still did all the foot, hand, and fingerprinting for Bella. I have her feet tattooed facing me on my feet. That way it's like she's standing on my feet facing me. I always imagine dancing both my little girls, but won't get the chance in this life. You can always dance with Bella if she's always on your foot. The most emotional tattoo I have ever done was a couple months ago. It was a memorial piece on a friend of mine, for a friend of mine. I did it a few weeks after his funeral and I couldn't help crying while I was designing it. It was really hard to keep it together while I was tattooing him and we were both really quiet during the process. I saw him tearing up at one point and it broke me. It's not the first time I've seen someone cry while being tattooed, but it was the first time I ever cried along with them. In a few months I will be topping that though. I will be tattooing my friend's widow. And now I'm crying thinking about it. Spent 3 months doing a sleeve design for a client. Just the design on paper. He paid me very well and stated the tattoo was personal and important to him as it described his life up until then. I told him I would do as many rough drafts and changes as it took as long as he paid an extra $100 for the redos. If I remember right, it was the shadows of people reaching up grabbing at various narcotics. With the universe as a backdrop, there was a demon holding a chain connected to a skeleton that was walking hunched over. It wrapped up and around to his shoulder blade, and he wanted a huge sun scented on his shoulder, overlapping the rest of the design. Also, a huge black widow that kinda crawled over his shoulder and overlapped the sun. The universe backdrop had lines in it, puzzle pieces forming the galaxy. I did it all in black and white, but the sun was in color. I guess it symbolized his life in recent years. As he described, he had gone through H addiction that had almost killed him. He said the birth of his son had changed that and fixed him, but before he had no recollection of what his purpose was. Everything is a puzzle, he said. The demon was H, chaining him while lifeless souls, other users as he said, tried to pull him down to heck. The sun represented his son, and the black widow his wife, who also tried to bring him down. He wanted the spider overlapping the sun because due to being his mom, she would always be present in his life no matter if he wanted her to or not. When I finished and gave it to him, he burst into tears, like sobbing tears. He gave me the remaining balance of $200 on top of the $350 he had paid me, and that was that. One of the few times I actually saw my work touch somebody like that. For a while in the early 2000s there was a very high murder rate in my city. I remember watching the news and there was a murder with said victim's name. The next day someone would come to the shop and get RIP, the departed's name. Capital I. T was like clockwork. It was pretty depressing. I hate to be one of the not a tattoo artist but as someone who has gotten a memorial tattoo for my stillborn daughter, thank you to the tattoo artists out there. My daughter will always be a part of me anyway and my tattoo for her makes that more tangible. Also, the physical pain of the tattoo took my mind off my emotional pain for a little bit too. The emotional pain was way worse though. Anyway, thank you tattooers. If you don't mind, I'd like to see a picture of your tattoo. I just lost my son a week before my due date on New Year's Eve. I've been debating what kind of tattoo to get and would love to see yours. I'm so sorry for your loss. It's the most horrific pain I've ever dealt with and wouldn't wish it on anyone. My younger brother got the portrait of his 6-month-old son who died of SIDS over his heart. It's a nice tattoo done in black ink. He had it done the day before the funeral. I have a tattoo of 2 intertwining trees, surrounded by 8 birds in flight. The trees are for my surviving twins, and the birds for each miscarriage. I've never heard of something so sad also sounding so beautiful. I cannot speak to what it is like to tattoo something like this on someone, but I can certainly speak to being the one tattooed. With me being tattooed is an extremely intimate experience anyway. I have to feel some kind of emotional connection with the artist or I won't ask them to tattoo me. I have cried during a few of them, not from the physical pain, just from the memories. Happy tears and sad tears both. My wife was killed in a car wreck. I didn't get any until a couple of years after she was killed. There are several tattoos I have that I saw my artist tear up over. Granted, I was kind of dating one of those artists at the time I had some of them done. That is just my experience. There is no dramatic masterpiece of art that was done. Just words, lyrics, and dates mostly. I think the one that was the most emotional was the one on the inside of my bicep that says, "And it's a little late for writing love songs. But I never did anything on time. Happiness on your big adventure. See you darling down the line. Compliments of Patterson Hood of the Drive-By Truckers." That's beautiful, man. It is really heartfelt. Honestly made me tear up a bit. I made my artist almost cry and laugh in the same tattoo. Long story short, my father-in-law passed away a little over a year ago from terminal cancer. I decided to get a tattoo in honor of him and for my family. There's a lot to the tattoo, but the thing that made my artist giggle and just generally put her in a good mood was the 2 giant pickles that we put in it. His nickname was Pickle because of our last name. It's not done yet, but the outlines are there and I freaking love my pickles. A former soldier came in and wanted his friends' names on him. He wanted ID tags with their names and the date that they died while having a dove flying over them and carrying the tags. Under it he wanted "We'll regroup in heaven." Hearing how he talked about them, you could tell they were great guys, and knowing how they died made me tear up. Not a tattoo artist, but the one being tattooed. My artist nearly cried when he was doing my memorial piece for my best friend who had killed himself. It in itself wasn't that sad, but we were discussing plans for my sleeve of memorial tattoos, which will have 2 more friends who died as teenagers, another that died in his early 20s, my mother, uncle, and all 4 grandparents. He said it was killing him to see somehow be around so much death at a young age. I was 19 at the time. A woman got her son's name and his handwriting on her back. He was around 4 or 5 and was not responding to cancer treatments. So emotional and such a loving family. My artist told me the only tattoo that he has done for someone for free was the audio map of the last heartbeat of his daughter who died in the hospital 15 minutes after being born. I know this is a terribly serious thread, but your typo made me laugh out loud. I pictured a teenage girl's eyes glaze over, first in boredom, then in death. In college I was friend with a group of people. Through the years we kept in touch. The 3 of them stayed extremely close. I was a few years ahead and got married. They were still students. They were always together, to the point that if you saw one and not the others, you'd ask, "Where's the rest of your puzzle?" The year of their graduation, one of them was killed by an ex-boyfriend. She left him a couple months before because he was becoming too controlling. He never hit her, as far as anyone knows, but she saw the signs and got the heck out of Dodge. She had been the social warrior of the group. She was due to graduate with her law degree and was really big into lobbying government for women's issues. It was a pretty big shock. There was a funeral in the town's live music bar because there were so many people attending. Over 1,000 people. It was one of those things where you weren't sure which was worse, that she died, or how she died. No one knows what happened. Her parents didn't want to know. We do know she had to have a closed casket. Her ex killed himself in police custody after he was caught a few days later. He was covered in cuts and bruises. Our girl knew how to fight and she fought hard. We walked the 2 blocks after her funeral to her favorite tattoo place. They had tats done of puzzle pieces. A heart, torn into 3 pieces. Each has 1 piece, and the 3rd piece is missing. I cried just watching. I wasn't the tattoo artist but the one who was tattooed. I got a memorial tattoo done for my best friend when I was growing up who happened to be the best man at my wedding. He passed away 1 month and 6 days after the wedding. I got the tattoo done on my forearm exactly 1 year after his death. Says Chad, the 10th of October 1979, the 30th of July 2006. Best friend. Best man. Man, he died on my birthday. I don't know much about you or him, but I will raise a glass to Chad on my birthday. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.